she dragged an injured creature into shelter, only to discover he was a human billionaire in a borrowed body. Ethan Cole owned half of the skyline and none of the peace that people imagined came with it. At 36 years old, he was the kind of billionaire that business magazines loved to put on glossy covers. He had built an energy empire that kept entire countries from going dark. His companies lit hospital corridors at 3 in the morning and powered trains that crossed deserts where nothing grew anymore. In photos, he always looked like a man in control. In the quiet of his penthouse, with the city of New York spread out in grids of light far below, Ethan felt less like a titan and more like a ghost in a glass cage. The wheelchair at his side was a constant reminder. 15 years earlier, one late night on an empty highway, a driver who had fallen asleep behind the wheel had drifted across the lane line. Metal had screamed. Glass had shattered. When Ethan woke days later in a hospital bed, the doctors told him that his spine was broken and would not heal. His legs were still attached to him, but they no longer belonged to his will. He had responded the only way he knew how. He built higher, faster, bigger. If his body was going to be confined, his influence would not be. He bought companies, launched satellites, funded labs looking for the next miracle in medicine. He could pay for almost anything. Almost. On a winter night that smelled faintly of snow and car exhaust, a woman from Aerei's extraction stood in his conference room, the city lights reflected in the polished table between them. Her name was Elena Maris. She did not waste time with compliments. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I am here to offer you something that no one else on this planet can." Ethan had heard variations of that sentence before. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in his lap. "Go on," he said. She tapped a command into her tablet. A holographic projection bloomed above the table, a spinning sphere of deep indigo and swirling violet bands. Lightning flickered in its cloud layers like the beat of a distant pulse. "This is Lyra 9, Elena said. A newly surveyed world 12 light-years from Earth. Its atmosphere is heavy but breathable. Its magnetic fields are extreme. And in the mountains that float within those fields, we have found something extraordinary." The image shifted, zooming in on jagged, hovering ridges of rock shot through with veins of pale blue crystal. "We call it aetheryte," she continued. "It carries an energy density far beyond any known fuel source and does so without producing toxic byproducts. With enough of it, we can rebuild every aging grid, every failing system, every city that is one storm away from collapse. We can rewrite the future of power." Ethan watched the light dance through the crystal veins. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. "And where do I come in?" he asked. Elena's gaze did not flinch. "Lyra 9 is not empty," she said. "The storms and the magnetically suspended ranges are part of a living, interconnected system. There are native inhabitants. Their physiology appears to be adapted to these fields in ways that affect their neural structures. Our scientists believe that if we can understand those interactions, we can map new treatments for severe spinal injuries." She slid the tablet closer. On the screen, there was a scan of a spinal cord, part of it dull and severed, part of it lit up with threads of new growth. "This is preliminary work," she said. "Modeled on data from our unmanned probes. It is not a guarantee. But it is a real possibility. Aerai has grown surrogate bodies, echo shells, using human genetic material adapted for Lyra 9. They are designed to survive on the surface and interface with its fields. We would like you to pilot one. In return, you will have first access to any medical breakthroughs that come from this research." For a moment, Ethan could not hear the hum of the heater or the distant sirens outside. There was only the word possibility, beating in his mind like a second heart. He thought of the nights when he woke from dreams of running, his thighs twitching with phantom effort, his hands gripping sheets instead of railings. He thought of hospital rooms, of doctors who spoke in cautious tones and never said the word cure. He thought of the way his life had narrowed to boardrooms and screens and the radius of his wheels. "Aerai is not a charity," Ethan said. "What is your real goal?" Elena did not pretend otherwise. "We want aetheryte," she said. We want to harvest it as safely as possible and bring it home. We need someone with your mind and your money to stabilize the political and economic side of that operation. And we need someone with a very personal reason to believe in Lyra Nine. Someone who has something to gain, Ethan said. And something to lose, she answered. 3 months later, Ethan lay inside a launch cradle as the Aeol's vessel burned out of Earth's gravity well. The vibration rattled through the frame and into his bones. Through a small round window, he watched his planet shrink to a blue marble and then to a memory. The journey through deep space blurred into stretches of induced sleep. Dreams came and went, disjointed and floating free of time. When the ship's systems woke him, his body felt fuzzy and distant, but his mind was clear enough to register the announcement. Approaching Lyra 9. He maneuvered his wheelchair to the observation bay. Outside the wide transparent panel, the planet turned slowly, a dark jewel suspended in an ocean of stars. Bands of violet storm encircled its equator, threading in and out of indigo cloud oceans. Now and then, a flash of lightning stitched one band to another. It was like looking at a living heartbeat. Aeol's outpost Lyra 1 clung to the edge of a high plateau, its structures anchored by thick pylons and surrounded by defensive towers. The landing deck thrummed under the ship's engines as it descended. When the outer hatch finally opened, a gust of heavy, cool air washed in, carrying scents that were not of Earth. Metal. Ozone. Something green and sharp, like the breath of a forest during a storm. Commander Briggs met Ethan at the base of the ramp. He was a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and a permanent squint from years of looking into harsh light. "Mr. Cole," Briggs said, "welcome to Lyra 9. We will keep you alive while you do your science and diplomacy." "It is Ethan," he replied. "And I am not a scientist." "Dr. Lin will be happy to fill that role," Briggs said. Dr. Maya Lin was waiting in the Echo laboratory. She was slight, with a calm intensity in her dark eyes that made cameras go quiet. When she shook Ethan's hand, her grip was firm, her expression measured. "You have read the briefing documents," she said. "You understand what an echo shell is. A body grown from my DNA, modified to handle Lyra 9's atmosphere and gravity," Ethan said. "It is stronger than my natural body, and it can interface with local fields. My consciousness will be transferred into it through the neural link." "Not transferred," Maya corrected gently. "Shared. Your human body remains the anchor. Think of it as extending yourself rather than leaving one body for another." Ethan glanced through the glass wall into the adjoining room. On a padded platform lay a figure that looked like him and not like him. The proportions were more powerful. The skin had a faint, iridescent sheen that caught the lab lights. Along the spine and limbs, there were subtle patterns of embedded bioconductive tissue that glowed softly as the monitoring systems ran checks. Seeing it made his stomach dip, as if he were looking at a reflection from a future that had not happened yet. "What about the natives?" he asked. Maya's gaze flickered to a cluster of holographic displays showing outlines of tall, slender figures with sweeping crests of filament-like structures along their heads and shoulders. "We call them the Aerai," she said. "They live in the floating ranges and the upper forest canopies. Their bodies are adapted to the storms. We have very limited direct contact. They avoid the outpost. They do not trust us, and I cannot blame them. Your echo shell will look human. You will be out of place in their world. But we have learned that they respond more to individual behavior than to labels. If you earn their respect, they may allow you near their wind temples. That is where the atmospheric fields are strongest. And that is where you believe the key to spinal regeneration lies," Ethan said. "Yes," Maya answered. "And also the key to destroying this planet if we are careless." She did not look away when she said it. That mattered to him. The first time Ethan linked into his echo shell, the world narrowed to the sound of his own breathing and the muffled thump of his heart. The cradle was soft against his back. Electrodes kissed his scalp. The neural interface lowered around his head like a crown carved from glass and light. "Focus on a single point," Maya said, her voice somewhere beyond the ringing in his ears. "One breath in. One breath out. Do not fight the transition. He obeyed. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the sensation of falling, but without direction. His awareness stretched thin, became a thread pulled through something tight and bright. He wanted to flinch, but he had no muscles to flinch with. When the pressure eased, his lungs spasmed. The first breath in the echo body burned like cold fire. His chest rose. His fingers twitched. He felt the brush of air on his face, the tickle of a stray hair against his cheek. He opened his eyes. The lab was there, but shifted. Colors were a fraction richer. The hum of the machines was layered with tones he had never noticed before. Ethan turned his head. It moved smoothly, without the stiff resistance he had grown used to. He tried flexing his toes. They moved. He sat up, swung his legs over the edge of the platform, and lowered his feet to the floor. The distance from heel to ground was not far, but the weight of it made his throat tight. He stood. For 15 years, standing had been a memory. Now it was a reality that sent a rush of dizzy heat through him. The room tilted and then steadied. You are doing well, Maya said quietly. Take a step. He did. Then another. The movements were clumsy at first, like wearing a suit that did not yet know his shape. But it was walking. It was real. A laugh broke out of him, half joy, half disbelief. He would have run if his sense of balance had allowed it. Later, when his initial exhilaration had softened into something steadier, Maya briefed him on the plan. You will not go out alone at first, she said. We will send 2 armored escorts with you. The forest is not tame. The storms shift quickly. The Aerai are not openly hostile, but they are protective. Your task is to observe, to learn, and if possible, to make contact. What about Alios and the Aetheryte? Ethan asked. They will push, Maya said. They always do. But the more we understand the loom, the more leverage we will have to argue against reckless extraction. The loom, he repeated. The pattern that binds the storms, the land, the lives here, she said. It is how the Aerai describe their world. It is not just weather. It is structure and memory and connection. If we tear threads out of it without understanding, we may break things we cannot fix. Ethan remembered deserts on Earth that had once been forests, rivers that had once run clear. He nodded. The first expedition beyond the perimeter fence was a lesson in humility. The trees of Lyra Nine rose in spirals and arches, their trunks veined with bioluminescent lines that pulsed gently. Leaves as wide as doors shifted in the wind, making a deep, throaty sound as they flexed. The ground underfoot was springy, threaded with root systems that carried a faint current his echo senses could feel. The armored escorts moved ahead and behind him, each one a towering suit of metal and composite, almost 10 feet tall. Their footfalls were heavy, their joints hissed with hydraulic whispers. Ethan felt like a thin, living line between them. They walked along a ridge that overlooked a valley filled with silver fog. Far below, a herd of 6-legged animals grazed on glowing moss, their hides slowly changing color as they moved. The storm arrived with almost no warning. One moment, the sky above was a clear deep indigo. The next, a low vibration rolled through the air, making Ethan's teeth buzz. The clouds thickened, turning the light strange. Bands of violet lightning began to dance between the distant floating ranges. We have a storm front moving in, one of the escort pilots said over the comm channel. We are heading back. The wind rose. It did not simply blow. It shoved. Rain came down in sheets so dense that the world shrank to a few yards in every direction. The ridge path became slick. Ethan dug his boots into the stone, but a sudden gust hit him from the side, nearly knocking him over. Behind him, one of the armored suits lost footing. The ground cracked. Stone sheared away with a grinding roar, and the suit pitched over the edge, vanishing into the fog. Man down, the other pilot shouted. Cole, move, we have to get you out of here now. Another blast of wind hammered into them. Ethan slipped. The ridge under his feet gave way. For a second, he hung in the air, the world dropping out from under him. Then gravity took him. He fell. Air tore at his clothes and hair. The blind white of the storm filled his vision. The thought came sharp and absurd, so this is what it feels like to fall on my own feet after all. Something hit him from the side. The impact drove the air out of his lungs. Instead of stone, he slammed into a warm, living weight. Vines snapped and grabbed around them. They swung in a wide arc, tangled in a net of fibrous strands that responded to their presence by tightening. When the motion finally slowed, they were suspended above the valley, wrapped in a living hammock of vines anchored to the cliff walls. Ethan coughed, gasping. As his vision cleared, he realized someone was pressed against him, holding him in place with a strength that felt wiry and controlled. She was taller than he was, long-limbed and balanced even in the swaying net. Her skin was a deep grey blue, patterned with faint lines of light that traced along her arms and neck, pulsing gently. From her temples and down along her shoulders swept a crest of fine filaments, like hair made of storm light. Her eyes were a molten gold, sharp and assessing. She spoke in a language that rolled on the air like wind through a stone arch. Ethan did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Annoyed. Frustrated. Not pleased to have had to catch a falling stranger. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. "Thank you," he said. "You saved my life." Her eyes narrowed at the unfamiliar sounds. She shifted her grip, anchoring them both with one hand while the other pressed against the vine net. The vines responded, contracting and pulling them toward the cliff above. They ascended through the rain, the valley dropping away beneath them. When they reached solid stone, she swung them onto a ledge with a practice motion and released him. He stumbled but managed to stay on his feet. She stepped back, looking him up and down with open curiosity now. Her gaze lingered on the faint glow of the bioconductive lines in his echo skin, on the way he stood, on the fact that he was clearly not Aerai. He touched his chest. "Ethan," he said. She regarded him for a beat, then tapped her own chest with 2 fingers. "Seren," she said. The name fit her. They stood in the storm's fading spray, 2 strangers from different skies, and something like an agreement settled between them. He was still alive because she had chosen, in a split second, not to let him die. That choice bound them more surely than any contract Aelios could write. Seren led him along the cliffs to her village. The Aerai lived not on the forest floor, but in the air. Platforms of living branches and woven vines were suspended between rock faces, connected by flexible bridges that swayed over dizzying drops. The structures glowed faintly from within, lit by strands of bioluminescent growth. Children with filament crests chased each other along the paths, their laughter carrying on the wind. When they saw Ethan, they stopped and stared, their eyes wide. Adults paused their work, hands sticky with sap and resin, watching with guarded expressions. At the center of the network of platforms, an elder waited. Their crest was long and threaded with silver. Lines of age marked their face, but their posture was straight. Seren spoke to the elder, gesturing toward Ethan, mimicking the arc of his fall with her hand. The elder listened, then approached him. They lifted a hand and held it inches from his chest, not quite touching. Ethan felt a faint pressure, as if the air itself thickened between their skin and his. After a moment, the elder made a soft, contemplative sound. They spoke a single word, slowly. "Kether." They touched their chest. "Kether." Ethan did not know what the word meant. Later, Maya would tell him that in the Aerai tongue, it meant something between guest and chosen one, someone who arrived uninvited but had been allowed to stay. For now, he understood only that he had been named. The elder spoke another phrase to Seren. She stiffened, then exhaled with something like resignation. She turned to Ethan and pointed at herself. "Seren," she repeated. Then she pointed at him. "Kether." Teacher and student. Guide and outsider. Whether he liked it or not, the roles had been assigned. Days fell into a new pattern. Each morning, Ethan linked into his echo shell, his human body lying in its cradle under Maya's watchful eye while his consciousness walked under Lyra Nine's heavy sky. He learned to slip away from the outpost without drawing too much notice, to follow the ridges and marked stones that led to the Aerai village. Seren taught him their words with the patience of someone who had not asked to be a teacher but refused to do the job halfway. She pointed and repeated until the sounds lodged in his mouth and his mind. Sky, she said, gesturing upward. Tailor. Stone, touching the ground. Vesk. Wind, lifting her hand to catch a gust. Loom. Heart, pressing her fingers lightly to his chest. Kara. When he mangled the pronunciation, she clicked her tongue and made him say it again. Sometimes he made her laugh, a bright sound like breaking foam. He collected those moments in his memory like rare stones. In return, he told her about Earth. He kept his word simple. Ocean so large you could sail for days and not see anything but water. Cities where buildings reached more than 1,000 feet into the sky. Fields that used to grow food but now only grew dust. She listened with a frown pulling at her brow, as if she could not understand how a world that sounded so full could be so tired. Seren showed him the loom. There were places on the high ridges where the wind did more than blow. It flowed. It channeled. It threaded through carved stone arches and hollow trunks in such a way that it produced chords of pure sound. Standing there, Ethan could feel the air humming against his skin and along the bioconductive lines in his echo shell. The loom, Seren said quietly, as if in a sacred place. The song that binds all. We listen. We learn. We remember. When Ethan closed his eyes, he could almost feel patterns in the sound, like the structure of numbers translated into music. He wondered what the loom would sound like to his human ears. Back at the outpost, Maya watched the data scroll. Each time Ethan stood within the wind temples, his neural patterns shifted. Even his human brain, miles above in its cradle, showed signs of subtle change. Pathways near his old injury site began to light up in tentative new lines. We are seeing early indicators of regrowth, she told him one evening, her voice cautious but hopeful. It is not dramatic yet. But the direction is there. How long? He asked. I will not give you a number, she said. Too many things could interfere. But this is more than theory. Aelio's executives, appearing on screens from distant boardrooms, were less patient. They pointed to Aetheryte yield forecasts and reminded everyone that delays cost billions of dollars. Commander Briggs stood before a holographic map of the floating ranges, outlining plans for expanded drilling operations. These deposits are concentrated under and around the Aerai wind structures, he said. We have tried negotiation through our science teams. It has not succeeded. Our mandate is to secure the resources. We will relocate the natives if we can, remove resistance if we must. Maya argued. Ethan backed her, speaking of atmospheric instability, of unknown feedback loops, of ethical responsibilities. Some of the executives listened. Others did not bother to hide their boredom. We are not colonizers, one of them said. We are contractors. The universe is not a museum. If we do not take this opportunity, someone else will. Ethan thought of Seren's face when she listened to the loom, eyes closed, lips parted slightly as if she were tasting the sound. He thought of the children racing along the hanging bridges, their filaments tangled together. We are not just contractors, he said. We are guests in a house we do not understand. The meeting ended without resolution. Ethan walked back to the Echo Lab with a heaviness that had nothing to do with Lyra Nine's gravity. On the ridge that overlooked the valley, Seren waited for him. She had a way of knowing when he was troubled even before he spoke. They will come, he told her, sitting on the stone, his legs dangling over the drop. With more machines. They will say they need this place. They will tell you it is only rock. Seren sat beside him, folding her long legs easily. They have already said these things, she replied. You are the only one among them who speaks as if the loom is real. It is real, Ethan said. It is as real as any grid I have ever built. Stronger because it holds lives instead of just lines. Then why do you stay with them? Seren asked. You could cut the thread that ties you to your sky people. You could remain only Kether. The question struck deeper than he expected. My body is there, he said. My name. My history. My responsibilities. I cannot just walk away. You already did, she said softly. Every time you choose to come here instead of sitting behind your glass walls. He had no answer for that. Love did not fall on them like lightning. It came like a change in the wind, subtle at first. In the way Seren adjusted her stride to match his on narrow branches. In the way Ethan began to anticipate her expressions, to know when a joke was forming at the corner of her mouth. It was in the moment he realized that the thought of never walking again was less terrifying than the thought of never seeing her again. Alios did not wait for their hearts to catch up. One morning, alarms blared through the outpost. Ethan's echo link was not active yet. He rolled his wheelchair to the briefing room, his muscles sore from hours spent in both bodies. Briggs stood at the front, armor already on, helmet under his arm. Orbital scans have identified the richest aetheryte concentration yet, the commander said, pointing to a glowing mark on the three-dimensional map. Here. Under this primary wind temple. Headquarters has authorized full extraction. We move now. Drill rigs, gunships, weather shields. We will secure the site and begin operations. Maya's face was pale. You cannot do that, she said. That structure is central to the loom. If you destabilize it, the storms could become uncontrollable. We have no models for what would happen. Briggs gave a tight shrug. Then we will make new models, he said. We cannot let a few superstitions stand between us and the energy that can save Earth. Ethan's decision crystallized in that instant. He wheeled himself out of the room without asking permission and headed straight for the Echo Lab. Maya, he said, as technicians moved around them, link me in. Now. You cannot stop this with one Echo shell, she said. They will not listen. They may not, Ethan replied. But the Aerai will. They deserve to know what is coming. She looked at him for a long second, then nodded. He lay back in the cradle. The link engaged. The world stretched and snapped back into focus as he opened his echo eyes to the lab and then to the path he already knew by heart. He ran. The forest blurred past. Branches whipped at his face. His lungs burned. The wind pushed at his back, almost as if it wanted him to go faster. By the time he reached the primary wind temple, the Aerai were already gathering, drawn there by a shift in the loom that only they could feel. The structure was a vast circle of stone arches and living towers, all singing with the force of the air rushing through them. The sound was so intense that it vibrated in Ethan's bones. He climbed the steps to the central ring, breathless, and searched for Seren. She emerged from the crowd, crest flared, eyes sharp. Kether, she said, what is wrong? They are coming, he said. With drills and guns. They want the crystal under this place. They will break it to reach it. Voices rose around them as Aerai caught pieces of his words and translated them for each other. Fear and anger rippled through the gathering. Seren's father, the elder of their village, stepped forward. They will tear the loom, Ethan said, switching into the Aerai language as best he could. Storms will go mad. The sky will not remember where to rest. The elder looked toward the storm banding on the horizon. His jaw tightened. The loom knows how to defend itself, he said. But many will break before the wind does. Let me help, Ethan said. Let me stand with you. Seren grabbed his arm. You will be in the center, she said. If the loom listens to anyone from your people, it is you. She pulled him into the exact middle of the circle. The air there felt almost solid. It pressed against his skin, against his chest, into his lungs. Speak, Seren said. Not to me. To Lyra. Ethan closed his eyes. In his mind, images flickered. Hospital corridors. Boardrooms. Contracts signed under fluorescent lights that hummed like tired bees. Forests turned into barren hills. Archives of numbers that could never wholly capture the cost of what they measured. He thought of his life as a straight line of acquisition, a path over other people's ground. He thought of the Aerai children racing along the platforms. Of Seren's hand on his when he took his first uncertain steps in the echo shell. Of the way the loom song had begun to untangle knots inside him that he had not known were there. He spoke aloud, in his own language and in Aerai, letting the words tumble out in whatever order they came. "We came here hungry," he said. "We told ourselves that hunger made us right. We thought that because we were losing our own sky, we had the right to take part of yours. We were wrong. I was wrong. If there is anything inside me that can be of use to you, take it. Use it. Just do not let them shatter you." For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the sound of the loom deepened. The pitch dropped and rose in patterns that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The air thickened. Ethan felt a pressure on his mind, not crushing, but immense, like the weight of an ocean resting on his shoulders. The first gunship appeared over the ridge, engines howling, floodlights piercing the dimness at the edge of the storm. Drill rigs followed on heavy legs, walking toward the temple with the stubborn inevitability of machines that had never had to ask permission. Aelio's weather shields flickered on over the rigs, shimmering bubbles that repelled rain and whined up to a point. Briggs' voice boomed from loudspeakers on the gunship. "This is a secured Aelio's operation," he said. "All non-authorized persons must clear the area at once. We will not fire if you do not interfere." A volley of arrows clattered harmlessly against the shields. Aerai voices rose in defiance. Seren stood at Ethan's side, her crest raised, her eyes fierce. "If you move, the loom will not hear you," she said. He stayed. The first real shot from the gunship struck one of the stone arches, blowing a chunk out of it. The sound was a crack in both rock and melody. The loom song stuttered and then surged. Lightning crashed down from the boiling clouds, not in thin forks but in thick, braided ropes of white fire. One bolt slammed into the gunship's shield. The field flared white, held for a second, then collapsed. The second bolt struck exposed metal. The ship spun and dropped, trailing flame, and smashed into the forest canopy below. Wind whipped up, not aimless, but directed. It shoved at the drill rigs, forcing them sideways. The ground beneath them buckled as the living stone and root systems reacted. On the outpost, Maya watched the storm data spike into ranges that no model had predicted. She listened to the panicked chatter of pilots and rig operators. "Pull back," she said into the command channel. "Briggs, get your people out of there. The atmosphere is not just weather. It is a network. It is defending itself. You are not in control." Through the link, she could feel Ethan's neural signature burning bright, threaded with new patterns that looked almost like a second mind woven around his own. Back at the temple, amid the roar of the storm and the screams of metal, Ethan barely had time to register the impact that knocked him to the ground. His echo chest exploded with pain. He tasted iron. The sky above him twisted. Far above, in the human body that still lay in the echo cradle, his heart lurched. Medical alarms shrieked. Technicians rushed to stabilize his fading vital signs. At the center of the stone circle, Seren dropped to her knees beside his fallen echo form. Her hands pressed against the wound, desperate, as if pressure alone could hold him in place. "Stay," she whispered, in Aerai. "Stay." The loom poured through him. Ethan felt his consciousness stretch between two bodies, two sets of nerves, two centers of gravity. For a suspended instant, he was the man in the wheelchair on a metal table, surrounded by beeping machines, and he was the echo shell lying in the rain on Lyra 9, and he was something else. He was the wind that had learned to sing through arches. He was the memory of lightning paths burned into ancient clouds. He was the echo of 1,000,000,000 raindrops hitting leaf and stone. The threads that tied him to his human spine were frayed and breaking. He could pull back into that body, try to mend it, live out his years on Earth with whatever remained. Or he could let those threads go and take hold of the ones that were reaching for him here. For the first time in his life, Ethan did not choose the option that preserved his holdings. He chose the one that preserved his home. He released the connection to his human body. The monitors in the Echo Lab flatlined. Maya stood beside the cradle, tears standing in her eyes, as she watched the readings from the Echo shell continue. On Lyra 9, Ethan opened his Echo eyes. The pain in his chest receded, replaced by a deep, steady ache that felt less like injury and more like being rooted. The storm's noise resolved. Into layers he could separate and understand. He could feel the loom not just as sound, but as a network that now recognized him as part of itself. Seren gasped, her fingers tightening around his hand. "You came back," she said. "I never left," he answered, surprised at how true that felt. Alios retreated. Not out of kindness, not at first. They retreated because their equipment failed, their pilots were shaken, their shields could not maintain integrity in the face of a world that had decided it was done being drilled. Maya argued in reports and debriefings that Lyra 9 was not a viable extraction site without catastrophic risk. Shareholders listened to numbers and to the footage of destroyed rigs and downed ships. In the end, the retreat was framed as a strategic withdrawal to focus on more profitable ventures closer to home. The outpost was dismantled in stages. Modules were lifted back into orbit, leaving behind only foundations and a few skeletal structures that the forest began to reclaim. In one of the last transmissions she sent through the faint neural echo that still linked her to Ethan, Maya said, "You were right. We did not deserve that world. Take care of it better than we did." "I will try," he sent back, though the words were more feeling than sound. Years on Lyra 9 did not pass in the same way as they did on Earth. The Aerai did not measure time in numbers of days so much as in the cycles of storms, the growth of certain flowering vines, the ages of children. They did not forget what had happened at the Wind Temple. They sang about it in low, strong voices, the way they sang about other storms they had survived. Ethan's name and the word Kether became part of those songs. At first, some Aerai still looked at him with suspicion. He was, after all, made of flesh that did not quite match theirs, carrying memories of a sky that had sent machines and fire. But he did not leave. He climbed with them. He listened to the loom. He helped mend damaged structures and comforted children whose dreams were still full of falling metal. Trust came slowly, but it came. One evening, as the storm bands glowed softly on the horizon and the air felt heavy with the promise of rain, Ethan and Seren stood on a high ledge. Their crests were braided together in the Aerai sign of deepest bond. Below them, the forest moved like a dark sea. Above, the stars burned. "I used to think home was something you could buy," Ethan said. "A penthouse. A company. A continent. And now?" Seren asked. He thought of the line of his life before Lyra 9, drawn across other people's maps. He thought of the line after, winding through branches and storms and songs. "Now I think home is the place where your weight does not feel like a burden," he said. "Where you are not just sitting on the world, but woven into it. Where the wind knows your name and answers when you call." A soft gust rose from the valley, lifting their braided crests. It curled around them like a familiar hand. Seren smiled. "The loom agrees," she said. Ethan closed his echo eyes and let the sound of Lyra 9 fill him, a chorus of thunder and leaf and distant, fading echoes of a blue world he no longer longed to own. He had come to Lyra 9 chasing the possibility of walking again. What he found instead was the possibility of finally standing for something. And he chose to stay.